Welcome back, everybody. We're now going to take a peek into one of the last major events of Period 7, but it's also one of the biggest events of the 1900s, not just for the United States, but for the world. In the United States, it's radically going to alter our economy. It's going to be a huge shock to American confidence in their government into the future. It is going to radically change political stances, and it's going to change the focus of elections, voting blocks. It's going to change the power of the federal government. It's going to alter federal policy. It's going to change society, fashion, cuisine, everything in the United States to adapt to what this issue is going to cause. And that issue is the Great Depression. So today's focus is really about the causes of the Great Depression and how did the federal government begin to respond. The next lesson we'll look at the FDR administration, the New Deal, but we're going to look at the first president to be in office while the Great Depression occurs and how his response radically alters the political future of not only himself, but his party and where the United States begins to go. So let's get into it. Before the Great Depression actually happens, before the massive stock market and the bank closures and all of the failures and all of the economic woes that come with it, there were some earlier warning signs. In 1927, there was a recession in the United States, but the government and business leaders largely ignored the warning signs. One way that they did this was the Federal Reserve lowered the interest rates for loans, so more people would be acquiring loans for things that they couldn't necessarily afford, as a way to try to continue to encourage people to buy and to stimulate the economy. But largely, this easy to get credit and easy to get loans led to people buying stock in what's called on the margin. They would buy it at a low price and expect for the price to tick back up into the future, and then they would sell those things off in hopes of making a profit. So think about someone who buys tickets to an event and hoping that in the future the scarcity is going to cause the price to go up, or sneakers or anything, right? Any collector's item. And the issue with that is what if the price never goes back up, right? People, when the Labubu's first came out, people were buying them like crazy, right, in 2025. But now, not so much. So someone who stockpiled those things up, if they didn't get rid of them, they would have lost their profit, most likely. And the same thing happens here, but on much more serious scales because it starts impacting businesses. The Great Depression happens as a result of the stock market crash, and that hits all areas of society. There's issues happening in Europe. Europe's not fully rebuilt after World War I, and so there are tariffs encouraging people to buy American goods. There's lack of trade, and so all of these factors built up, plus a few more, lead to the Great Crash. On October 24th, 1929, we have Black Thursday, which is initial shock and crash to the system, but 5 days later, Black Tuesday, October 29th, is the big one. A bunch of panic investors start selling their stocks, which causes the value of those to largely decrease. It causes the stock prices to plummet, which causes the valuation of businesses to go down and the amount of money investors that they have. Banks begin to lend less money, factories are producing less, and workers are fired or paid less to deal with the fact that the factories or the companies are not getting money from the banks who don't have the money now, or what they loaned money on, people could not pay back. As a result, the individual consumers are buying less because they have less money, because those are the workers who are getting paid less or getting let off. Then as a result, because they're buying less, that creates a larger impact on the companies who are not able to sell their product, and then they start to close. And this does not just happen to a couple small factories, businesses. It's happening all around the country, small-scale stores. It's also in the banking industry that causes mass failures and people lose their entire savings overnight. One of the best ways to look at the Great Depression and look at the measurement of it is we can just look at raw data, all right, or we can look at statistics, right? So the Dow is a measure of the most prominent country or prominent companies in the United States on the stock exchange, right? A higher number means that the best companies or the most profitable companies, most valuable companies in the United States are doing their best. So when you see it's really, really high, it's really, really good. When you see it really, really low, it's really, really bad, especially in these sharp drops, right? We see Black Tuesday, we see a short recovery, and then we see a massive, massive fallout, right? And when we get to that market bottom, notice it's all the way down here in 1932. that is an election year, right? That's coming up on an election. This is July 1932. The election happens in November. So that is going to be a pivotal point in that election year. The failure of the current administration in office to provide relief. You usually can't blame an administration for something that happens, but many people do blame them for the failed response. Right? You can see newspapers talking about the panic. It's not just an American issue, it's happening around the world. So global events are affecting the American economy, and what happens in the United States is also going to have ripple effects around the world. One of the easiest to understand, but one of the most staggering effects that we can look at in terms of data is we look at unemployment. When the stock market originally crashes in 1929, there's maybe about 1 million people that are unemployed in the United States. By the next presidential election, the unemployment rate is over 12 million people. It's going to get so bad in 1932 that 25% of the American public workforce is unemployed. That means 1 out of every 4 people who are looking for jobs, who are hunting for jobs, who are trying to find jobs, can't find one, even though they meet all of the criteria of an eligible worker. To also put this into the perspective of like good and bad percentages, 25% is a lot. In a good time period, we're hoping like unemployment is around like 4 or 5%. Right? This is 5 times that. It is extremely, extremely bad. And notice it's going to take a long time before that actually dissipates down to the pre-crash levels. It's going to take until World War II, and that's going to be crucially important. So why does this happen? We know what with the crash, that's this big moment, but why does this happen? There's a variety of factors you can look into. One, you can look at the overproduction of like durable consumer goods or agriculture. From the consumer good perspective, right? People are not needing to rebuy goods because they're lasting longer, and so that's going to hurt some businesses. Also, overproduction of agriculture. If there is a larger population of things, right, larger supply of things, their value will largely go down. We also have high tax rate or tariff rates with other countries encouraging people to buy American goods, and so there's a decreased trade. Also, Europe is still in shambles from World War I largely, and so they're still reeling over there, and there's not a huge trade network happening that way too. So there's a variety of things leading up to it. And then you deal with things like the unequal distribution of wealth, massive debt, the over speculation in the stock market and buying on the margin, really leads to a variety of stacking issues that lead to what is known as the Great Depression and how bad it's truly going to be. And we're going to see, right, that in the 1920s, there is going to be that Gatsby lifestyle you see in that picture on the right. But on the far left, we see the underbelly of cities as well. Both of these things are true at the same time. And when the crash happens, it's going to hit everybody, but some people are going to get hit a lot harder than others. Specifically, different minority groups or farmers, right, are going to be hit exponentially larger than other groups statistically. So you can find graphs all over the internet about this, about different causes of the Great Depression, but largely it's going to compound upon itself. There's a variety of different ways that we can look into how the impact goes down in the Great Depression, but we're going to do it in this kind of like imaginary model. Imagine that you are going to be working in the car industry or something related to the housing industry. So we'll say you own a gas station, or you work as a mechanic, or you sell lumber, or you build houses, or you sell any of these things, or you sell furniture to furnish these houses. You are going to be affected in very 2 different ways in the 1920s versus the 1930s. In the 1920s, right, housing and car sales are up dramatically, right, astronomically. Right, there's credit systems, installment plans that allow people to get things that they don't have the money for and pay as they go. And as people purchase these goods, even though they're going into debt, as they purchase these goods, the economic effect overall is going to be largely positive. It's something known in economics as the multiplier effect, where say you buy a car, that doesn't just affect the car sales industry, it's the car production industry, it's the manufacturing, it's the shipping, it's all the pieces that go with the car. And when industries go down, it affects other industries in a similar way. Let's look at how this crash could hypothetically impact, right, the automobile or homes industry. So if there's less expansion, that usually means there's going to be less jobs, which means there's less people to build the plants or work in the machinery, regardless of either field, right? So in that case, like say you're in the automobile industry, like that's going to hurt the machine producing industry as well, right? If there's less factories, that means there's less cars being produced, and that means there are less cars on dealership lots, which decreases the ability to sell them, even if they're not even selling all of them to begin with. That means car salesmen, they're going to lose their jobs. Auto workers are going to lose their jobs because the orders for cars go down. Mechanics are going to lose their jobs because there's nothing for them to necessarily work on, right? Or people are going to try to do more things from home, right? Steel workers are going to lose their job because their entire industry is largely stimulated by the booming car industry, right? You look at home sales, right? Home sales are down. That means construction workers don't have as many things to build. Factory workers for furniture and salespeople for furniture are also going to lose their jobs. And then now, because people are low on money, those people that have homes will say they can't afford the car, but they have a home, right? Then you talk about food, right? They're not going to have any more clothes, or they're not going to be eating out, and they're not going to be going out to restaurants and going to grocery stores as often. They're going to find other ways to try to get around it to survive. So this can exponentially get bad very, 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 very fast. But it can also work the other way, which becomes the big question: how do you solve an economic issue and something of this scale, like a depression or a recession? So we want the multiplier effect to go well. How would that turn out? If people start buying cars again and when their car gets run down, that means car dealers are going to make more money and have more orders, which means you're also going to have auto workers and steel workers are needed to fill these roles, right? Furniture wears down too, and so eventually you're going to need people to replace those goods. And so whether it's the people producing them or selling them, that's important. You have more employment as a whole. More people are able to afford homes as well, and more food. So that means construction, grocery stores, restaurants, clothing industries. All of these things are going to boom as these excess luxury goods continue to roll in. And on top of that, of course, the machinery workers. So the multiplier effect goes both ways. But how do we encourage the positive multiplier effect instead of the negative one? And that becomes the big question for government. So how bad does this get when it gets bad, right? When the multiplier effect goes really, really bad, what does that actually look like? So in 1929, the total debt of the United States was 210% of the value of the GDP, right? The GDP is the gross domestic product. It's the total value of all goods and services built in a country or sold in a country in a given year, right? So of all the value of all the stuff that we produce in the United States in 1929, our debt was 210% of that, right? So much more. Then you get to 1934, it's up to 265%. And then you're going to see the sharp decrease on the map here, and everything's kind of stable. But we have a massive stock market crash in 2007, and we saw warning signs of this back in 2005. The value of the U.S. debt was 303% of the GDP, right? So this is kind of the sign that we can start tracking. When it starts going up, 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 eventually that bubble's going to burst. So in the United States, in the 1930s, how does that shake out? The United States is hurt really, really bad by the Depression. We start about how does that affect regular people, not just numbers, people. Many families lose their homes or their farms, and they're forced to live in these shanty towns of sheet metal and scrap materials, whatever they could build, to try to build some sort of housing from the elements. And they become nicknamed Hoovervilles, named after the President of the United States, who gets blamed for what happens during the Great Depression. But these aren't just nice sheet metals and things that people can build together in materials that are even and uniform. They're anything they can find: doors, frames, scrap pieces of wood forced together to try to provide some protection from the elements. And these are massive. These are not tiny itty bitty things, right? Pictures of entire cities. Central Park in New York City is taken over by them, in cities all across the country where people don't have anywhere to go. And this is the situation that they're forced into, and they largely blame the government for failing to respond. But it's not just these Hoovervilles, but all other sorts of things get named, have Hooverisms. A Hoover car, a car that's so broken and busted down, they took out the engine and they don't have gasoline, they have a horse pulling the physical car. 1 horsepower. Bad joke, I know, but come on. right? Hoover blankets. People don't have blankets to cover themselves in the cold, and so all they have is newspapers and scrap papers there to cover themselves. Hoover flags. People are so poor they can pull out the inside of their pockets that's completely barren and empty, right? It looks like a white flag waving for help. Even animals that are nicknamed like Hoover hogs, right? Any animal that they could find to eat, to just scrap to survive, whether it be armadillos out west or any animal, any rabbit, anything, bird, sometimes rats, anything they could get their hands on. And so in this time period, we saw unprecedented poverty rates, suicide rates, fathers abandoning their families, lawlessness, right? And the US government offered relief checks to the unemployed initially, which helps, but that is only a temporary band-aid solution that does not provide lasting solutions to the problems that they're facing. Then when we talk about the effects that we've previously seen, like the Great Migration during the 1920s of African American populations to the north escaping the Jim Crow situations, or farmers out west moving to cities, African Americans are largely going to be the ones who are laid off, right? That have already migrated to the north. Mexican immigrants are going to be faced with deportation, driven off their lands by other angry Americans who are using them as scapegoats. The middle class was hit especially hard. Some of them were too proud to accept relief checks and charity. They felt that they were above the poorer class, but they're largely going to get swallowed up by this. Many people lost their home, healthcare declined, doctors and dentist visits were seen as luxuries rather than necessities because people are desperately scrapping by. Pictures like this are super common. Relief check lines, people waiting outside all day just for the chance of getting some sort of economic relief or fighting for a job. There may be a crowd of people, and the dock of the day that they're at, if you're in a shipping town, they only need 5 bodies. And so it's scrapping and fighting for a paycheck that you can hopefully feed your family or help provide some relief. Soup kitchens and bread lines going all the way around the block, trying to provide some form of relief to this. And there is charity and there's great work that's done, but it's no match for the sheer volume of people that need it. People losing their houses, their homes, piling everything they can, every scrap of wood on top of a car, making that their home, anything they could possibly do to scrape by to make money. You see vehicles like this piled up with people's entire life savings, that baby just on the ground, right, on a small towel or blanket. That's all they really have, and all of their belongings are shoved up on the top of this vehicle. You see people jumping on moving freight trains and moving from place to place, and right, kind of this derogatory name of like a hobo, or people using bindaloos becomes like a common picture or name that's used, right? And so the American culture, American psyche is shocked. And then, of course, there's this famous photo: jobless men keep going. We can't take care of our own. A town had to put up this entire sign as people are moving, trying to find work, doing anything they possibly can. And again, more picture of these Hoovervilles, just really re-emphasizing how much of a common part of the United States life this is. This is not a few small people being affected. This is a national and global event that people are seeing. Again, volume. So where is the government in all of this? Most people look at Herbert Hoover and have him, right, kind of blame him for everything that's going on. And that's not entirely fair. But largely his policy is this attempt, building off of Warren Harding's return to normalcy, of a large taking a step back of like laissez-faire policies. He does not take a massive overarching intervention into it. Why? Normal economic policy suggests that eventually there is going to be a turn back if we can grit and push ourselves through this. However, that doesn't happen. Rugged individualism, right, although sounds nice to just push through and pull yourself up by the bootstraps, doesn't work in a depression. It goes much longer. It breaks traditional economic rules of how things are going to turn back up. It called for people to volunteer and help their fellow Americans, but again, that only went so far. But that's not to say that Hoover actually did nothing, right? As things got worse, there were federal programs that were created, like the Reconstruction Finance Corps, which loaned money to failing businesses, but By that time, a lot of the damage was too late, whether we're talking about PR damage and political damage or also the economic devastation across the country. There are big building projects like the Hoover Dam out west that's created, right? And this is an example of something that FDR is going to build off of in the next administration and use on a massive scale to try to solve the issues of the Great Depression. But for Hoover, it's very much too little too late. So in 1932, we see really the end of Herbert Hoover's presidency for a variety of reasons. One of them, veterans of World War I were demanding their bonus checks early that they were supposed to be paid in a future, right, within the future decade. And there is a group of 22,000 veterans who marched to the Capitol and camped out, and they were forcefully removed by the federal administration trying to remove the so-called bonus army. That's not going to be a good PR look. That's going to get more resentment towards you as the end of his first term begins and he gets ready for the next election. That's going to hurt really, really bad. And also the continual rise of bank failures during this time period is going to completely collapse the U.S. banking system. People are going to lose their entire savings overnight. So right here, you see a poster for the Veterans March on Washington, right? Why they're marching, who they're marching for. There's this kind of formed moment of unity where it's white veterans, black veterans, right, pushing for this cause, and it is massive. You can't even see the steps, right? This is a moment of, right, this coalition coming together, and this is the group that's going to be forcefully removed from the Capitol, right? We see the tent set up, the camp set up, fire is set to one of the camps, and again, creating more and more tension here. It's going to be one of the biggest blows that he's not going to be able to recover for, on top of all of the other economic data that we've been looking at. So where does that leave us with bank failures? By the time 1932 hits in 1933, when the winner of the 1932 election will officially be sworn in, we are in the groups of thousands and thousands of banks being closed in this time period. There is no federal protection. When these banks close at this time, every single penny that had been saved up is lost. Imagine you are a 60-year-old person who has worked your entire life, saved your money well, you've worked hard for everything, and overnight, everything you have worked for in your entire life is gone. You can no longer pay for your home. There are no loans. You've lost your business. You've lost your job. You're too old and frail to work, right? There is going to be a massive change in a variety of groups, but even that group is the one that sticks out to me the most, right? It's going to be a huge push for leadership for people that think, oh my gosh, 10 more years I can retire. And then, of course, nothing's better than a good meme right here at the end. However, I would be remiss if we don't talk about this thing called the Dust Bowl too. While all of that is impacting mostly businesses, what's happening to farmers? Why are farmers hurt too? This natural disaster called the Dust Bowl hit. It's almost like it's like a dust tsunami, dust hurricane that's hitting all across the country, blotting out entire sections, ripping up entire farms, making it impossible in some cases to breathe, people being buried in dirt and sand. Something out of a horror movie, right? And the areas where it's largely hurt are the center of the country, so that's going to decrease in some cases some people's food supply or farming supply, and people are going to migrate west looking for new opportunities. So population out west is going to boom. But the same issue is going to take effect where people are moving to cities and there are not jobs. The jobs that they're hoping for and looking for aren't there, and it's only going to create more tension. Latinos, especially specifically Mexicans living in this area, are going to be huge targets. Native Americans are going to be huge targets, right? People are going to get the last of the assistance, the first ones to get fired, and then even just any other kind of poor middle class white as well. And then you have these scary, 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 scary photos, right, of the amount of dust like swallowing up these buildings. And you get derogatory terms for people from Oklahoma and Arkansas that have moved out and strapped everything to their vehicle to try to make it, called Okies or Arkies from those respective states. And if you do want a good novel that really captures this, John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath really covers this blight and this struggle during the Great Depression. So the inability of the Republican Party and the Republican president to really resolve these issues really opens the door for a Democrat to really take over. And in addition to previous elections we've seen, Democrats have been starting to kind of build a voter coalition, voter bloc, right? And ultimately, they succeeded in relieving some of the suffering, helped restore hope, which was a big psychological revamp, and for the first time, seeing a massive, unprecedented level of government intervention while doing so. And so this is going to create a massive pendulum swing in politics. It's going to be a swing from really kind of the far right, far conservative movement to more liberal and heavy government intervention, heavy government action. And we're going to see where that pendulum swing takes us moving forward in this course. So what did we look at today in this video? How can you sum it up in a single minute? Really, it comes down to this. The Great Depression was a massive shock in the 1930s. People assumed the consumer revolution and the prosperity of the 1920s, the roaring 20s, would roar on. But that's not the case. Once the stock market crashes in 1929, businesses close, millions are left unemployed, and largely Americans began to look for the government for unprecedented support. The laissez-faire policy of the 1920s and that attempt to return to the Gilded Age era of that as well are going to be abandoned. So we're going to see where that picks up in our next video. Happy studying, folks. Good luck. Keep fighting the good fight.